let's talk about the academic community. What is happening when we are a student at a community college, university? What is going on when we do this? Now, the place I want to begin, and I'm going to be here on my whiteboard, that's fine. The place I want to begin is to talk about what happens after you leave high school. This is a general introduction. We'll talk a little bit about what that means. After you leave high school, you basically, this is called post-high school, okay? You basically have a few options. One option, obviously, is to jump right into the workforce, go to work, right? So, for example, you go get a job, do something. A second option is to go on to further education. Okay? One way people do that is by going, for example, through the military route, where they will do a certain amount of military training, and then ultimately they find themselves going on to some kind of higher institution of higher learning. Okay? Now, we got to talk through this real quickly, just so you have a sense of what we're doing and talking about when we talk about this academic community. Okay? The first kind of opportunity is what we will call the junior college experience, okay? Now, the reason it's called a junior college, or sometimes short for JUCO, is because theoretically, when you finish or you leave the university, the high school, and go on to this junior college, when you graduate from this experience, supposedly you have 2 years of college. That is to say, you're no longer a freshman or sophomore. You are a junior in standing. So what we're talking about, our junior college, is a 2-year program, normally, okay, where when you finish, you have what is called an Associate of Arts or an Associate of Science degree. Okay? So if somebody's talking about, I'm working on my AA or I'm working on my AS degree, that means they are going to a 2-year program where they are getting this Associate of Arts, Associate of Science. Now, with some rare exceptions, getting an Associate of Arts and Associate of Science degree doesn't mean a lot. You can't do much with it. It is what we call a degree that you transfer with to the second option, which is some kind of college. Okay? Now, here we're going to pause for a second. And we're going to call this first kind of college a liberal arts college. Okay? A liberal arts college is a 4-year school or institution where at the end you will receive what we call a Bachelor of Arts, BA, or a Bachelor of Science, BS. All right? So you're taking a degree in which you get a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science degree. All right? A third option is what we call the university. And here, again, a 4-year institution where you also get a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science degree. Okay. But one of the interesting and important questions is what's the difference between a 4-year liberal arts college, let's say, for example, a very prestigious one in Iowa called Grinnell College, okay, in Iowa, in the middle of a bunch of cornfields. They put this college out there where you pay about 40 grand a year to go to there for 1 year, okay? What's the difference between a college like that and the University of Wyoming, for example, a 4-year university? Or what's the difference? I love to ask incoming freshmen this question. And they kind of begin to understand, oh, there's a reason why we're getting this lecture. What's the difference between the University of Wyoming, for example, in Laramie, and Harvard University outside of Boston, Cambridge, Massachusetts? Harvard, of course, we all know to be very prestigious, but my question is, why? Geographically, they're in 2 different places, and it may shock you to know that there are students every year who turn down Harvard to come to Wyoming, to the University of Wyoming. Every year this happens. But, well, then why is it that Harvard has the reputation of being a prestigious school, and the University of Wyoming, with some exceptions, does not have that level of reputation? What is the difference between the two? Now, that is an intriguing question, because, for example, many of the people who prof at the University of Wyoming come from schools like Harvard, where they receive degrees. So we're going to ask a couple of questions here. What's the difference between going to Northwest Community College, a 2-year program, going to the college, liberal arts college in Grinnell, Iowa, called Grinnell, and going to the University of Wyoming or going to Harvard? What is the difference between those kinds of institutions of, are you ready for this, higher learning? Now, the reason why I had you write down on your notes, the topic of our little tutorial here was called the academic community, is that when we use this phrase, we're talking about all of these different kinds of academic options. And when you begin to start down the process of going to school, I like to say it this way to students early on. You need to ask why. What do you mean why? Why are you getting a college degree? Or why are you taking college classes? That's not always the same thing. Some students just take classes. They have no interest in a degree. What is the difference? Classes, individual types of experiences. A degree is when you take all of those classes together towards a specific credentialing called a Bachelor of Arts, a Bachelor of Science, an AAS. So as you get ready to go into this kind of an academic experience, it makes sense to me that you would ask to know a little bit more about what these all mean. But we're not done. Watch my whiteboard. Not only does the university have a 4-year Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science, they also have other degrees as well. At universities, unlike liberal arts colleges, at universities, you also have what we call graduate degrees. I've had students who say, dude, I've heard people say this, I'm working on my graduate degree, but I never understood what that meant. Let's talk about it now. A graduate degree is a degree that you take beyond your normal 4-year program. Normal 4-year program, Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science, is often what we will refer to as an undergraduate degree. Simply meaning, before you go to graduate school, you have to have completed your university experience. You cannot go to graduate school until you have a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science. Got me? When you go to graduate school, and you can do this at universities, but you cannot go to graduate school at liberal arts colleges. When you go to the university to go to graduate school, the first kind of graduate program is what we call the master's degree. Okay? The master's degree. This again is an MA or an MS. Obviously, much has been made of some of these acronyms, like BS, obviously. Right? An MA or an MS. Now, what does that involve? Well, master's degrees involve usually 2 to 4 years of study, okay, on top of the university that you've already done. You got to do 2 to 4 years of more study. And at the end of that study, you're going to write a book of research that we will call a thesis, a master's thesis, okay? And this book of research is between 100 to usually 500 pages of research, okay? Got me? Okay? That's the first kind of graduate degree. The second kind of graduate degree is what we call the PhD, sometimes referred to as the doctorate, okay? Now, dude, what's up with that? The doctorate degree, okay, is 4 to 8 more years of study, just like the master's degree. And at the end of this, you have to write another book, right? Okay, only this time the book is not called a thesis, it's called a dissertation, okay? A dissertation. The dissertation is a book of research between 250 to 1,000 pages, depending on the kind of research that you're doing. All right? Now, the university has other kind of graduate programs as well. For example, you can go and get a law degree. This is a very particular kind of degree that lasts 3 years. You have to pass the bar, and then you become a lawyer. Or you can take what's called the MCAT and go to med school, right, where you can get a an MD degree, a doctorate degree that allows you to practice medicine. Okay, this project usually lasts anywhere from 4 to 8 years, depending on kind of how the program is constructed and when your constituted is finally out. Now, got to ask a really important question here, dude. What is up with the difference between a liberal arts college like Grinnell and the university like Wyoming or Harvard? The answer is kind of interesting, actually. In our university graduate programs, there is a very particular program called the Teaching Assistantship, TAs. Teaching Assistantship. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means, for example, that Miss Strout decides that she wants to go to the University of Wyoming and she wants to write a master's or a PhD in English, let's say. She's just that crazy. And so she's going to write a PhD in English. She, at the University of Wyoming, will take classes, but she will also teach. Teach what? Undergraduate classes like this one, for example, a 1010 class. Make sense? So while she's going to graduate school, she's also teaching for the college. And this is, of course, a way for the university to be able to kind of, balance its teaching load. It allows for students to be able to get paid some money, to remove some costs to go to school, etc., etc. Okay? Are you ready for this? TAs only happen where you have graduate programs. Okay? Liberal arts colleges have no graduate programs. Therefore, all of their instructors are full-fledged professors. That is to say, they all have PhDs. Okay? One of the interesting questions to always ask when you're doing your interview, for example, at the University of Wyoming, is to ask, of the freshman courses that I will take, how many of them will be lectured by full-fledged profs with PhDs? Okay? The answer to that at most universities is very few. Why? Because freshman level courses are often going to be lectured by students who are working in a graduate program. Now some parents, and this will explain why parents will sometimes spend $40,000 or more to send their kid to a private elite liberal arts college, some parents want their kid to only be educated by full-fledged PhD profs. So they'll pay the extra money to send them to a Grinnell or wherever. Got me? Probably one of the worst case stories I ever heard was at a university where parents were complaining that their son had taken a math class that was lectured by a guy who was a TA working in the physics department, and he was from China. He couldn't speak any English. But he was lecturing computer science to, out of the physics department. And their son couldn't understand anything he was saying. The parents went and said, dude, I mean, we're paying money to send our kid to school. He can't even understand the lecturer. I don't care if he's really smart from China, but he can't say anything, he can't explain it very well. To which the dean of the college said, well, look at it this way. He's getting better at English while he's teaching your son. That didn't go over very well with the parents, as you can imagine. The challenge for some parents is we're just willing to pay the extra money so that our kids can go to a school where they're going to get lectured by full-fledged profs. This is the other reason why, at oftentimes universities, incoming freshmen will take the honors program track, where they will then be usually guaranteed that they will be lectured by professors with PhDs. Now, let's point out something real quickly. Now, you maybe want to watch my whiteboard to see this. When you go to university, it's very important that you understand that credentialing right there of a PhD matters. And if you have a prof who has this, you definitely want to call that prof Dr. Wilson. If you often will say, Mr. Wilson, you will be corrected. I'm telling you this in advance so you don't feel like you're being yelled at. Mr. Wilson, I'm sorry, that's Dr. Wilson. Really? But if you'll think about it, it will make sense to you. Dude, for him to receive that PhD, do a little math. He not only had to go through 4, at least, sometimes 5 years to get his undergraduate, but then he had to go 2 to 4 more years of a master's degree, followed by 4 to 8 more years of a PhD. Depending on his degree, or her degree, this individual could have been in school for over 12 years of college just to be able to lecture you, and therefore probably deserves the right to be called Dr. So-and-so. You see what I'm saying? Okay. Now, I've given this lecture to this point for a reason. You are about to enter the academic community. Okay. The question becomes now, what is this university all about? What is it for? Okay. Now, I want to answer this question because it's vital to your survival in college. There are students who study with me who say, the information I'm now about to present is as important as anything I ever say in the 1010 class, just so that you got some sense about what is the point of all of this, okay? Let's play a little game, shall we? Let's imagine for a moment that, I don't know, let's just say it. Miss Vega there is a prof at Stanford's Medical Center, Stanford University, one of our most prestigious schools in the world. And she lectures there in the medical department, okay? Her job is to also, however, teach a class for incoming freshmen, we will say. Okay, so she's got to teach this class for incoming freshmen. So Miss Vega has to teach this class. Let's just say for a second, Miss Vega is working late one night in her laboratory, and she all of a sudden discovers a cure for a certain strain of cancer. Hurrah. Question, what does she do with that information? Because she can't go on Oprah the next day and tell the rest of the world about her cure for cancer. Why not? Because she will use language that pretty much 99% of the people on the planet will not understand. She works in a very particular field of cancer research where she's not going to be able to talk about this research. What does she do when she discovers a potential cure for cancer? The first thing she does is she writes an essay. No kidding. It's the first thing she does. She sits down and she writes an essay. An essay? Yeah, an essay where she explains her findings. Now, some of you maybe heard this. The New England Journal of Medicine today reported that blah, 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 blah. The New England Journal of Medicine? What is that? Well, it's a periodical or a journal that somebody like Miss Vega at the University of Stanford would publish in, where then other researchers, like for example Miss Hep, would take her research out of the New England Journal of Medicine and try to replicate her findings. If her findings are replicated, Miss Vega just hit the big time. Why? Well, she now is a professor at Stanford University who is considered an expert in the field of cancer research, where Stanford University now is able to derive huge amounts of grant money to do more research. What is the difference between the University of Wyoming and Stanford? Why is one considered so prestigious and the other, in most departments, not considered so prestigious? The answer is a simple one. It all has to do with research. Now, this is a word I want you to write down right now in your notes, and I want you to be able to follow it. Follow this lecture later, and that'll be no problem. You know how to access it, so it's not a problem. What do we mean by research? Well, think about it. Miss Vega is a prof at Stanford. She spends her academic life doing two things. One, she reads. Reads what? The New England Journal of Medicine. Why does she read the New England Journal of Medicine? To discover the research that Hep has published there so that she can replicate it. Why does she need to do that? So that she can make sure that the findings are legitimate. So she reads a lot. She spends all day long reading periodicals. So for example, the next time you're at the University of Wyoming, or you're at the Northwest College, or at Sheridan, any college, any institution of higher learning, go into their library, walk up to the circulation agent there at the desk and say, I'd like to go into the periodical reading room. Well, now what is that? The periodical reading room is the room where the New England Journal of Medicine is there, and lots of other journals are there. In every single discipline on a university campus, there is research that is being done within that discipline that must be published in these journals. So Ms. Vega does a lot of reading. Two, we've already said it. When she finds her discovery for cancer, what does she do? She writes an essay, right? So her writing of an essay is the second thing that she will be doing, because obviously she's going to publish her findings. Question: if Miss Vega is given the assignment of lecturing a bunch of Stanford freshmen, what can you predict will be on her course outline when she comes into her room to lecture these students? What two things can you predict she's going to make her students do a lot of? The two things she does. Doesn't that make sense? She spends all of her time doing what? I just said it. Reading and writing. Do you got me? Okay. So it won't shock us when we discover, for example, that when she hands out her course outline, guess what? There's a whole lot of two things. Lots of reading and lots of writing. Make sense? The university or the academic community requires two skill sets. Reading and writing. There's a reason why we do so much of it. The academic community looks something like this. Are you ready for this? Upside down pyramid. Everybody begins their freshman year. We had a lot of people. And then very quickly, over the course of 4 years, students have to make a decision. Do I stay in or do I drop out and go into the workforce? At any given point in the 4 years of undergraduate school, as you're working for that BA, BS, at any given point you can jump out, bail, and try and get a job. A little bit more education makes you a little bit more competitive, right? If you can finally make it all the way to the Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science, you got your 4-year, 5-year degree. This is the degree that most of the people who are in your life, who are adults, are saying, you got to get a college degree. But here's the problem. There was a time in America when if you had an 8th grade degree, you had a degree that most people did not have. Then everybody started getting 8th grade degrees. A little bit later, it was if you had a high school degree. If you had a high school diploma, dude, you could go get any job you wanted. How come? Not too many people had a high school diploma. Then, after everybody got high school diplomas, it was what? Got to get a 4-year college degree. Got to get your Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science, correct? The only problem is that what? We know more students are starting college classes in the fall than in the history of America. Which means in 4 years or 5 years, more people will what? Right? More people are going to have that degree than in the history of America. Which means what? Shrinking number of jobs, larger number of graduates, which means what? Some of you, by definition, are going to have to stay in school and go on to graduate school. Some of you are going to obtain jobs that will require that you have at least a Master of Arts, a Master of Science. Got me? What the university does, as Ms. Vega would be testifying to, if she was a teacher at Stanford, when she walked into a freshman year symposium, she would be immediately looking for the students that she thinks will make it to the end. Those are the students she's looking for. Got me? Let's point out something else. Ms. Vega's primary job is to do research, where she can publish essays in the New England Journal of Medicine and elsewhere, so that she can get grant money, so that the University of Stanford can be considered one of the top in the world. See, Stanford is known for the amount of monies that it gets in the form of grants. That's what makes Harvard so much more prestigious, for example, than the University of Wyoming, with some exceptions. The University of Wyoming, for example, has an engineering program that's considered one of the elite in the world. There are students who will turn down going to the University of Harvard so that they can come to Wyoming, so that they can study specifically maybe in geology. It's another program in Laramie that's very strong for us. Why? Because we do so much research in especially oil reserves out here in the West. See? So depending on what it is you want to ultimately do, you can look at a university program. But one thing is common throughout all of the academic community. Doesn't matter whether you're at Northwest College, doesn't matter whether you're at Grinnell, doesn't matter whether you're at University of Wyoming, Stanford, or Harvard. There are two skill sets every single university within the academic community requires. Every college. And they are what? We've said them, haven't we? Right? Reading and writing, huh? Those are the two skill sets that you either acquire them and you're successful with them, or you're not. And if you're not going to last long in this academic community. So I make a simple suggestion now to finish my tutorial lecture. You know you're here and you're starting. For many of you, this is your first introduction to the academic community. My question to you is, how will you use the academic community to help you? Because if you don't use the academic community, it will use you. I'm always saddened when I watch those football games on Saturday, and I see those stupid boys, especially in the crowds of the football games, and they're like way drunk and stoned and everything. They got their shirts on. Yeah, dude, this is awesome. They do not have a clue, do they? Why they're there. It'll only be a few more weeks. Midterms will come. That's the beginning. That's the middle of this semester. They haven't been going to class because they've been having too much time, fun, party and stuff. And we know about these guys, don't we? They drop out, they come back home, up and down Main Street, right? And then they go get some job somewhere. The reason why they weren't successful is not because they were stupid. The reason why they weren't successful is they didn't know why they were there in the first place. And they didn't understand that if they were going to survive, they had to have those two skill sets. Right? So, I make a suggestion to you. Two things. One, identify your primary weaknesses in these two areas of reading and writing. And then try to improve a little bit every college semester. I promise you, by your junior year, if you stick it out, which is what it is, and that's what it is, it's sticking it out, right? It's hard work to get an Associate of Arts, Associate of Science. Hard work to get a BA/BS. Hard work to get a master's degree or PhD. It's not easy. But if you stick it out to wherever you need it to jump out to go into the workforce, you're going to be better at those two skill sets by the time you leave. That I can absolutely guarantee. Why? Because that's pretty much all you do. That is pretty much all you do. You read, you write. So identify where your weaknesses are in both those areas and then try to improve a little bit. Make sense? That's my suggestion to you. So it doesn't shock you then that we've been talking already a little bit about both of those skill sets. Notice that that's right where we began. That's why this class is the first class in your college university career, right? Because what do we do in a 10-10 class? We spend a lot of time talking about how we can improve our reading and our writing. How come? Because the Miss Vegas of Stanford are out there waiting for us. You're going to take a history class where they're going to make you read. You're going to take a psych class where they're going to make you read. You're going to take a badminton class in PE. And guess what? You're going to have to buy a book. No kidding. Guess why? Because if Miss Walstead is the PE instructor, she is a prof. That means she did research to get her degree. To keep her position and her tenure, she has to continue to publish. So guess what? There's several periodicals or journals of badminton. The science of badminton, the construction of the equipment of badminton. Of course, it's one of the most popular sports in the world. You live in a place where it's not popular, but thousands and thousands of people all over China every night will watch badminton because it's a hugely popular sport. But Miss Walstead's doing research in this area in every single discipline on college campus. Every one. There will be research that's being done. So it's significantly important that you know, no matter what class you take, you're going to be asked to buy a book, specifically a textbook, to that discipline. Make sense? So, Axelrod Cooper. Who are these cats that write this book? I'll give you a hint. They kind of teach writing. And they do a lot of research in writing. You got me? Right? Does that make sense? So, as you begin this process, you want to ask yourself, how can I get better in these areas? And even though you're not really good at it, I always recommend that you start looking forward. I know I can get a little bit better. The truth is right now, as soon as most recently high school graduates, you can admit, you're probably better at reading and writing than you were when you were a freshman. See, you've gotten a little bit better. Now you're going to begin to really take giant leaps forward, and here's why. You want to. You're here tonight, for example. You didn't have to be. Some of you are here because somebody said to you, you know what, you really should be doing this. Others of you are here because you said, I got to do this for money, for a job, whatever, okay? So I suggest you learn how to use this academic community. Don't let profs intimidate you out of a class. Recognize you're in the history class, you're in the psych class, you're in the science class for yourself to get a degree, ultimately to get a degree, to improve in these two areas of reading and writing. Make sense? You got any questions for me? Sometimes students will ask questions at this point about, I've heard this term or whatever. Do you have any questions for me about any of that?